Morning, everybody. I just want to welcome you to this webinar, which is Law in the Cloud, the journey to a successful Azure migration. So thank you for taking the time out to join us today. All right, just to introduce myself, my name is Richard Cheney. I'm the Azure Practice Lead here at Cloud Direct, joined here in November. Prior to that, I spent 7 years at Microsoft as a Senior Cloud Solution Architect. And I've spent more time than I want to admit to working in IT. Okay, today we're going to run through a very simple agenda. Hopefully it's going to prompt some questions. Kim is monitoring the Q&A that you see on the side of your chat if you click on the icon. And so if you've got any questions, please feel free to post them within there. And then Kim will interrupt me as we go through the deck if it's the right time to discuss it, or if it's something that we're going to park and then talk about at the end, then we've got time for a Q&A session at the back end of this. But in terms of the main flow of the agenda, we're going to talk through what a well-defined strategy looks like for a legal organisation contemplating a cloud journey and how we move into that. And then we'll go into a little bit more detail around Cloud Adoption Framework and how we at Cloud Direct can help remove some of the friction that we see in terms of adopting cloud and making that journey easier. There's a few law firm considerations that we've put in there. We're lucky to have worked with a number of different law firms here at Cloud Direct, so we've got some experience with some of the difficulties and challenges they face when they're moving compared to other types of organizations migrating into the cloud. And we've highlighted some of those in our top 5 migration mistakes for law firms. So let's crack on. Okay, so we're going to look at the well-defined strategy aspects of this first, because it's very easy to start talking around immediately migrating into the cloud without actually making sure that you've taken that wider view as to what is going to make you successful as an organization. So really establishing where you sit on the cloud journey is a good place to start. So most of our customers are starting on the left-hand side. Those who've been with us for a while are moving up this curve as they go through. So this is a bit of a maturity curve, if you like. So we've got migration on the left-hand side, where really it's taken those first steps into the cloud and taken some of the key workloads, and that might be a percentage of your workloads, or it might be all of the portfolio that shifts over into Azure and be managed there, depending on what you're trying to achieve as an organization. And then once it really sits within the cloud, then we spend a lot of time looking at how we optimize the workloads, as well as how we work with you and with other partners often in terms of managing the workloads that sit in different parts of the ecosystem. Modernization is really the next step for a large number of organizations, because lift and shifting or doing simple replatforming into the cloud does give you a lot of benefits, and a lot of our customers experience those benefits, but really it opens the door to a whole host of different opportunities to modernize applications. So if you're looking to really change how the application itself is designed and architected, built, deployed, and what services it wants to make use of in terms of PaaS databases, data platform, analytics, if you're looking at scalable systems which are more event-driven, such as containerization or serverless or other PaaS services, then really a platform like Azure is a great destination for that. And then once you get past that, is really what are you doing with the data? So one of the difficulties we see with law firms and other organizations when they are working with their systems on premises is it's much more difficult to analyze the data. Again, as soon as you move into public cloud like Azure, then you're going to have access to a whole different realm of systems and platforms and tools which can enable you to really analyze the data. And we've recently made a lot of investments around the data and AI practice we also have within Cloud Direct to help our customers get those benefits. Last thing, let's talk about elevation. So AI and generative AI specifically has been a bit of a game changer for a lot of organizations over last year. And we're talking to a lot more who are really testing the water to see what they want to do and what kind of use case scenarios that they're going to benefit us from there as well. So it might be something as simple as leveraging some of the inbuilt embedded Copilot tooling that Microsoft offers with things like Microsoft 365, security, development with GitHub Copilot and other parts of the platform, or they may be looking to extend that to really get grounded in the data they have within their system. So you can see that going through modernization and getting a better data platform and that analyzing the data and cleaning it up can help with some of that grounding. And some of the best organizations are really doing that to really accelerate their time to value and the speed at which they're getting insights on that data, which for organizations such as yourselves, where time is money, is of a major interest. So lots of discussion around this point. Right, I'm just going to dip into the portfolio planning because you've all got wide estates with different applications that you take and bespoke systems, and a lot of important data, and access to that data needs to be highly regulated. So really, conversation around the portfolio planning is for those of you who are looking to make a move into the cloud and change how you manage your portfolio over time. It's really, what does that look like? And it doesn't matter how many yards you're going to look at in terms of establishing a target portfolio for this, but really going through that planning for which of those applications you're looking to retire, which ones you're looking to move into pure SaaS as a solution and replace it with that, which ones you're going to rehost and relocate and move to different locations if it's just sitting on IaaS as opposed to virtual machines sitting within your data centers or colo locations or other places. Likewise, if you are looking to re-architect or significantly re-platform an application, making use of containers, or redesign an application from the start, then there's a lot of different options for that. And understanding how your portfolio looks now and actually what that phasing looks like for different parts of the application is part of the conversation we can have with you to help you establish those parts. Some that make sense in terms of what that roadmap looks like and what that phasing looks like, and what we see with most organizations, because they will have a level of skill gap in terms of what they can do within the cloud, is really isolating those applications which are important enough to move into the cloud, but also simple enough to move into the cloud. So looking at things like basic web apps or some of the portals, new solutions, if you're looking to innovate within the cloud, are some of the key things that we see our customers choose as their first workloads when they move. Next is really some of the more complicated. So those of which have got high online transaction processing demands, very high speed, also need to be highly resilient. And a lot of you will see a lot of the regulatory and high business impact of certain workloads, particularly with a lot of the new requirements coming out, such as DORA, around how you manage workloads and how you manage the vendors and the organizations you work with to facilitate those workloads is one of those key things. The ones which are often hardest to move and sometimes never move are the high value assets, those sort of PKI based systems, legacy systems, mainframe systems, some which are very hard to unstitch or costly to move. So we do see a large number of organizations adopting hybrid as an approach, which is why we, again, from our managed service perspective, we can deal with both hybrid and multi-cloud in terms of what we can often assist our customers depending on how they look at that with that. But likewise, these tend to be systems where it's much more difficult to unpick them, but re-architecting those with a pure cloud approach is one approach that some organizations have been taking, just make sure they capture the data and the processes, but have completely new architecture to help deliver the platform in the first place. So establishing that Azure IT roadmap is a key part, but it doesn't really lose visibility of the people who are using the system. So I'm just going to point out the modern work roadmap on the top right there. This is really where we see a lot of SaaS adoption, not just with the third-party tools that you're used to working with within the environments, so Clio and others, but also just the standard tooling that you use from Microsoft in terms of Microsoft 365, Office 365, adopting SharePoint and OneDrive in terms of your file storage and all of the controls over the file access within that as well, particularly with the sensitivity labels and everything else you can do to ensure retention and access is appropriate for the data that's out there. And one of the other big areas, and this comes into the data platform as well, is just really the Power BI when it comes to doing reporting services and automating processes. So if you have consistent workflows which you want to have adopted as low code, no code, then the process automation you have with Power Platform integrated with everything else we just talked about is an approach that organizations are taking to make sure that they are getting speed and efficiency in the way that they're working with the systems. Right, so a lot of this gives a good idea of where you want to head to and what the target environment looks like, but how do you actually then look after that environment? How do you operate within that? There's a large amount within this in terms of how you do things today. So when you're looking after a platform, when you are maintaining those systems, when you're maintaining the software on those, maintaining the availability of those, handling change within it, handling data within that and the access to that data. There's a huge number of things here within the governance, corporation, security, business, and supporting functions which apply to what you do today. How does that look when you move into the cloud? There's a lot of commonality and a lot of consistency in some of the terminology and what you do, but how it gets done, some of the skills you need to do that will change. So one of the things that we always do when we're talking to customers who are going through this process and this transformation is having the conversation around not just what that target platform looks like in terms of the workloads and how they sit and architecturally how they look, but how they're going to be maintained, how they're going to be supported, what does it look like from a business as usual operational standpoint. With that, we dive a bit deeper into the cloud operating model. So in terms of that split responsibility, which you have today in terms of how you work with vendors, how you work with software vendors, how you work with those providing the actual hardware platforms that you maintain systems on, how do you work with third parties that assist with some of the out-tasking you have on those platforms, is a very similar conversation to the cloud operating model in terms of what are the people, processes, skills, tasks, responsibilities, and that whole split responsibility model in terms of how you're going to operate once you've moved into the cloud. So as part of this, Cloud Director has a large number of managed services, but we take a very bespoke approach in terms of having a deep conversation with customers to plan out how that target looks and formulating the appropriate split in that responsibility and therefore the professional services, managed services you would like to see from us to help you in your journey. Right, to go through this process, we take advantage of Microsoft's Cloud Adoption Framework to make sure we have that as the guiding framework for how we approach that in the first place. So a lot of what we just talked about there falls into some of what we have around defining the strategy for what you want to do as an organization and how you're going to have that target state. The plan is really not just around how you're going to iterate and go through the cloud adoption plan, get it aligned to the strategy and deliver the success that you want to see back to the business, but also what it means in terms of people, process, working with organizations like ourselves for any managed services you want to see, but also for your own people, what it looks like in terms of reorganization. What is it like in terms of establishing what skills you have in-house, what skills you're going to need in the future, and therefore what that gap analysis looks like from a training perspective. So it's really defining everything within the strategy and the planning for success as you adopt and you transform into working in the cloud. The other pieces at the top right are much more consistent with traditional migration or new build type projects. So being ready in terms of assessing the workloads, planning the phasing of a migration, for instance, and having a target environment, an Azure landing zone, to be able to migrate those two is really key. And again, we're very close to Microsoft in how we work within the Cloud Adoption Framework, how we use Azure landing zones as our opinionated targets for our best practice environments for compliancy and management and security, and then how we work with well-architected framework to establish how the workloads need to look in terms of resiliency, operational excellence, cost management, and security, and all the other aspects which makes a workload well established within the cloud. So this feeds into how we adopt Azure by either migrating or innovating into it. But I really want to focus a little bit around that bottom piece, around how you govern, prove compliancy with how you maintain those workloads, how you manage those ongoing, and how you then apply a security baseline. We have a lot of experience to help customers on this path, and a lot of service which help in this area. A lot around the Azure landing zones is geared, particularly around the governance and the compliancy to help you achieve what you need to achieve as an organization with respect to those. And that can apply to what you land within to Azure and also what you have in other locations, such as on premises, within colo environments, data centers, or other clouds. So we can extend that with what we do. Right, so I've talked through a lot of that. Again, this is another slide which dives a little bit into some of those specific areas. So going through this is the multi-phase part of the projects that we do when we're helping organizations to really transform into the cloud. And it really gives an opportunity to discuss with you, depending on what your target strategy is and how you want to migrate and take advantage of cloud technologies, as to how we help you in that process. I'm going to take one example because this is a common example for most organizations who haven't made a great deal of use of cloud so far, is how they migrate some of their key workloads. And then we talked about that planning earlier around isolating some specific workloads as like that starting point into adopting cloud. Obviously, from a migration perspective, we're working with the Cloud Adoption Framework, and we're really looking to look at those significant business cases which you can do from a digital transformation point of view. So actually the reasons why different organizations decide to migrate into the cloud is very varied. Some of those may be based around data center lease expiration dates. It could be based around hardware refresh dates. It could be with just a desire to operate differently within the cloud and take everything at a large scale. And we have quite a few of those conversations. Or it may be that you have a specific business opportunity that you want to take advantage of services which you know only exist within the cloud. So again, conversations around co-pilots and what you can do with generative AI and the open AI large language models is part of that conversation in terms of, okay, what are the different opportunities in terms of having different software available to your business to work differently and to your customers too. We do a lot around partner support requirements, how we work with you, how we work with Microsoft to make sure that your systems are supported, both from the actual operational point of view, but also configuration and anything else that you need to do the pieces where you don't want to invest time and people in handling those, and you'd rather out-task it to a capable partner. We can help you with technical skilling plans, and we have organizations which help with training specifically as you get people who want to upskill into different new roles to help manage that workload within the cloud, again as part of that target cloud operating model. So depending on how you want to flex that in terms of what you want to look after and what you want others to look after, we can help move that dial from left to right to make it work for you. And we also get involved in the assessments in terms of assessing your current workloads and therefore what the target looks like. And likewise, how we then go through the migration planning. So this is, we're one of the biggest migration partners within this space. Within the UK, we do a lot of migrations and a lot of managed services around what we do. So this is home territory for us. In terms of optimizing it, then the landing zone and governance is really key for us. So having that as a best practice design, again, with a lot of input from Microsoft as to what that design looks like and some of the considerations around it. I'm quite passionate about how this looks. Back at Microsoft, this is part of the team I worked in as well. So I've got a lot of experience with landing zones and with Cloud Adoption Framework and how we as an organization here at Cloud Direct go through that process and make sure that your workloads are going to be governed in the correct way, having that split between the governance council and the governance team who are then basically implementing and reporting on the governance. So you have that separation of duties. But if you've got specific compliancy requirements in your organization where you need to prove the controls that you have over the workloads, then everything around the compliancy reporting with Azure Policy and Azure Policy initiatives will help you to achieve that. Right, we also have the migration execution, which is working with you in terms of change organization, testing, runbooks to make sure that your acceptance in service for newly migrated workloads is where it needs to be, because we want to make sure that at an application delivery perspective and a service delivery perspective, that this is a best-in-class experience for you in terms of how we migrate and execute that phase of the project. And then looking at optimization and management, this is really looking to make sure we optimize the workloads in terms of how you operate against those and how much you're paying for those. So FinOps is a real big area for us in terms of how our customers work the platform and how we make sure that you're getting the best value for money out of the platform such as Azure, and how you then manage that workload as you go through. Got a link at the bottom of this, which gives a step-by-step guide to creating that Azure migration strategy as part of our learning hub. So another part of it, this comes into the technical skilling plans. It's not just third-party training that we do. We have a belief that we teach, help our customers from the teaching perspective. So you'll see that there's skills transfer and a lot of information that we pass on to customers to help them become better enabled within the cloud. Right, so I hope that gives you a feel for how we as an organization help different organizations, both within the legal industry and outside, in more generally, how they adopt and transform into the cloud. I want to talk about some specific law firm considerations. One of the things that we have within this is we know that adopting cloud has costs itself. So we have done a lot of work with Microsoft to take advantage of the different initiatives and incentives that are available to us as an organization. They're available to us because we have put a lot of work into making sure we are on different programs and we are very highly accredited. So we'll see what we have in terms of Azure Expert MSP and different specializations, and you'll see the level of investment we have within our people to make sure that we have the skills to help you as a customer. But as part of that, we've isolated a number of common areas where our customers are turning to us for assistance around how they migrate workloads into the cloud, how they then optimize those, how they modernize new applications if they're looking to take advantage of PaaS services, serverless, containerization, and in their new applications, and how they want to work with DevOps. So if you're a customer which has got your own development team and you have your own development style, that we can help you adopt better development styles with DevOps when you're working with a cloud platform, which is really such a natural home for developers to work with. We also invest a lot in our own Cloud Center of Excellence, but also enable customers when they're building up their own. So depending on how you want to position that going forward. If you want to have that in-house, or if you want to have some of that split and shared with us, then we have different models there in terms of what we can do. Data and AI as a practice covers a number of different areas, from both the data platform transformation, data hygiene, governance, purview over different workloads, and really getting that modernized analytics platform in place for doing more complex AI, for doing more complex analysis for your data. So again, this is a specific practice that we have to help our customers along that. We also do a lot around security, both from a managed XDR perspective, what we have with Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and also as a SIEM and source system, making use of Microsoft Sentinel and our trusted third party, who does a lot in terms of very much deeper threat hunting in this space as well. So we deal with security across the board with all our workloads and how we design, but specific services in terms of how we then surface security alerting and act on those from event management and automated response to those. And then we have our modern work practice as well. So in terms of the end users within your environments, making sure they have the tooling and the best practice, best integrated systems, making use of modern 365, all the authorizations, conditional access, MFA, and all the security you expect from working in a modern identity-based system with all the tooling that gives you. Right, so there's a number of different areas there which you can then see across the bottom. We have the workshops, discovery, landing zone, pilot, POC, design, and migrate, which are fairly common to most of those. So as a framework, we try to transition that. You can see that across the board from left to right there, we've looked for opportunities to ease the friction with this. So in terms of helping with migrations or optimizations, we do a mix of our own funding and Microsoft funding to help go through those different processes. So if any of those areas are of interest, then it's worth having a conversation with us just to see how we can make that path a little bit easier for you. Just to give you an example of that, this is a specific one where we had a legal firm that wanted to undertake a significant portion, not potion, of their estates into Azure. So again, another organization which went through that portfolio planning and isolated the areas which they thought made sense for migration to Azure. As part of that, there are 140 servers that they wanted to move into the platform. So in terms of reducing that cost of change, we work very closely with Microsoft, as we always do, to help secure over £75,000 worth of funding to help with different phases of the migration, depending on types of workload and how it worked in there. So in terms of the overall cost of the migration into the cloud, you can see that that took over 65% of the overall cost. So the actual customer balance is much reduced on the right-hand side there. Obviously, it's never going to be completely free, and we wouldn't expect that, because we want to see you put some skin in the game in terms of what this means to you as an organization. But in terms of making sure the impact from a cost perspective of that change is minimized, then we're here to help. Okay, so again, this is taking that for the Azure Migrate one as a specific example. You can see how that worked with the funding that we had from Cloud Direct and what we had directly from Microsoft. So in terms of the pre-sales and some of the discovery work, then we'll help you work out what you want to see in terms of Azure Migration. We'll talk through the well-architected framework and how that applies to different workloads that you're looking to migrate into the cloud, and understand what the current state and what it looks like in terms of prioritizing workloads from Azure Migration and how that works. Going through in terms of securing a pilot environment with the Azure landing zone and some of your core initial workloads, and showing success for those helps us to secure some funding from Microsoft to help you with that process. But at that point, you've got an Azure environment that's been stood up. You understand how that's working and how you work with us as an organization if you want to split the responsibilities for that ongoing with our managed services. When you look at the design, when it comes to some of the low-level design and planning, then again, it's taken that to well-architected framework approach, reviewing the workloads and planning how they look. So those different levers in terms of how resilient the system needs to be compared to the cost management, how you're going to operate those, are then incorporated into the design. A lot of these will be very familiar with you, depending on how you work on premises, but some of this will be taking advantage of new concepts and design patterns that you'll see when you start working within the cloud. And then we'll deploy within the Cloud Adoption Framework and making use of the well-architected framework at a workload level to then build it right and migrate those workloads securely, safely into Azure, whilst maintaining that service availability, minimizing downtime as much as possible. So that hopefully gives you an example of that specific one. Like I say, we could have done a similar conversation around all those different opportunity areas, and they're just some of the most common ones. So actually, whatever you need to do as an organization, we're here to have a conversation with you to help you achieve that. Right, so covered a number of different areas to show how we make life a little bit simpler. Here's a few other things to avoid doing because we've seen where this has hurt organizations in the past. So this is part of our experience as to what's going to work successfully for you. One of those is diving in too quickly. So we spent a lot of time at the beginning of this session talking about having a clear strategy for how you want to work as an organization, how that filters down to your migration strategy for some of your key initial workloads as part of that portfolio planning, and making sure that that is sound and solid and you understand what that target state is going to look like from a workload and from a management perspective is really key. So you want to look at that portfolio, you want to look at the cloud operating model. So having that enables you to then assess and optimize your operations through the process and making sure you're then going to achieve the success which you've got defined early on in terms of what is going to work for you as an organization. So again, you don't want to move over workloads which are too trivial because you want to be able to prove the success of the migration as much as possible. So picking out that important but relatively easy to migrate first workload is one of those important spots. The other area which is really important for us, and we see this with a large number of organizations we work with, is compliancy. So ensuring that you're on top of those compliancy regulations, which are always changing, being updated, is one of the major reasons we see certain types of organizations looking to adopt cloud. There's a lot of tooling that's built into the platform to enable compliancy reporting, to enforce it, to also help you achieve it in terms of remediation and automating some of what needs to be done to give you those guardrails to make sure you're in the right place with your workloads, regardless of how you deploy them onto the platform. So compliance is a real strong suit. You'll see this when you look at things like the Microsoft Trust Center, where it's got lots of reporting on the different compliancy levels. So if you're looking at things like ISO 27001, UK official, we work with NHS organizations, so NHS UK comes into that, but also cybersecurity requirements and other areas which are coming through, then these filter through to Azure policy initiatives, which help with the reporting against that in terms of how the platform is configured and how the operating systems and the data is managed on top of that. So it takes you a long way to helping to proving that you're compliant with those. So working with a migration specialist who understands what regulations that you're trying to achieve and incorporating those into the design is a really important part to the landing zone design itself, and also how you then operate that ongoing in terms of maintaining that compliancy over time. Same applies to security. So security and cybercrime itself is one of the biggest growing sectors in our industry. So making sure that you're well protected from that cybercrime means taking advantage and making sure that you've got one of the strongest sets of security around your systems. So protecting your data, protecting access to your systems, making use of compliancy to help reinforce those security best practices, and again making sure you've got the reporting to take that zero trust approach to how you design your applications, and making sure you have assumed breach type approach to making sure that you are reacting to any data security events which will happen over time. So that's you need to understand that these people are very successful at what they do for a reason. Okay, the other thing we think is quite a key one is really being sensible about the vendor choice here. There's the reason why we as an organization have very much pivoted solely around the Microsoft suite is because, having reviewed the different platforms, we believe that Microsoft offers the broadest public cloud set of services. And so it's not just Microsoft Azure that we're talking about here, it's what we're talking about in terms of Microsoft 365, it's about Entra ID, formerly known as Azure Active Directory, as a cloud identity service. All of these things are designed to work together and integrate effectively and efficiently. So in terms of meeting most organizations' requirements for public cloud delivered services, then actually being able to work with an organization such as Microsoft and ourselves as your face into that enables you to take advantage of all these things and get the integration between those platforms. And we think it's the most cohesive set of products that integrate well to help deliver that. We're also seeing that with future innovation possibilities. So Aon on the Azure platform has been around for a good period of time in terms of the cognitive services and what you can do with vision and translation and natural language processing, but really the new innovations that are coming through from generative AI and the open AI large language models and all the grounding and vectorization that you can do with that in terms of augmenting results when you're having those platforms and integrating with your systems is where we see a lot of the innovation coming over the next couple of years. And that itself is driving adoption of the cloud. So because people want to take advantage of that functionality and all of the ecosystem that is baked into the platform to really do that efficiently for your applications, particularly for the most common use cases, means that organizations want to migrate their workloads into the cloud. They want their data in the cloud so they can make the best use of those large language models in working with that data. So that's part of the overall picture in terms of where we're heading. Moving everything at once, avoiding the ocean is also one of the risks and the dangers. So one of the things that we think is really key for this is an iterative approach. So isolating those key workloads and working out the phasing, and then going through that iterative approach where you're landing those first workloads, and as an organization transforming and slowly accumulating the skills you need to work effectively within the cloud, or again, outtasking to us with the managed services, is a big part of that. So working with non-critical applications and data, again, that level of capability, and then moving on to the next workloads and the next workloads, whether they're migrated or innovated onto the platform, is a key approach to making sure you're making use of that. And it de-risks what you're doing. And obviously, de-risking everything is really key when you work in the legal sector. And again, time is money. We want to make sure that you're working effectively and efficiently and with the confidence that you've got the skills and capabilities and experience to work with the platform. So going at the right pace for you as an organization is important for that. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a bit of flavour as to how we work within the legal industry, how we work with the platform more generally, and what kind of services and approach you can expect from an organisation such as Cloud Direct. Just want to highlight some of the other customers that we worked with within the sector. So you can see the different names which are up there, and this list will be expanding over this year because we're very successful at the moment. But I just want to pick out a couple of those. So Ashurst there on the top left worked specifically with us because they wanted to make sure they had a managed desktop solution, and again to help manage access to the systems and access to the data and secure those correctly. So they took advantage of Azure Virtual Desktop as the platform to make that happen. And that as an approach is something we're seeing more of this year as well. With the VMware sale to Broadcom recently, there's been some announcements as well. So for those customers who've got VMware Horizon and are concerned about what the roadmap looks for that as a platform, then again, that's a conversation point where if you're looking for what the next steps for you are, feel free to talk to us about Azure Virtual Desktop because that's a natural destination for those workloads. Also want to mention Flatgate. So they've worked with us in terms of that target cloud operating model and a migration project. So we've had migration projects and we've got managed services where we've got that split responsibility with their target cloud operating model. And we'll have a Microsoft video for that specific use case, which shows how that best practice works in terms of making use of that assessment. Also want to mention Mishcon Dure, a little bit lower down. So again, they've another customer which has gone through a similar path in terms of establishing how their portfolio looks, doing the Azure migration and adopting some of our managed services to get the best fit and allow them to concentrate on what's important to them as a business and where the value is. Last thing, not least, Freeths in the middle there. We're going through an earlier part of the stage at the moment. So going back to us removing some of the friction, they're doing some of those initial assessments. Again, they're reporting from that to really better understand what their strategy needs to look like and what the next steps need to look like. So it's a good example of the early parts of that process as we then sensibly go through that transformation, go through that journey with you. Okay, and, nice quote on the right hand side there for us as well. Okay, I mentioned earlier about the fact that we have access to a number of different incentives and we've got a lot of expertise, part of our investment within this. So we are one of the top 1% of Microsoft partners in the Azure space. We are an Azure Expert MSP, which is one of the most difficult accreditations to get third-party audit for that, which needs to be maintained each and every year, which again demonstrates our expertise and investment in our managed services within that. Last year, we were also one of the finalists for the Partner of the Year in the UK around what we do within solution assessments and work with Microsoft directly. We have a number of different specializations. So across the 5 different workload areas for what's called the designations, you can see we're specialized in a number of different areas. And that list will be expanding as we go through more audits this year, again, to reflect our investment in our people and the technologies that we know that our customers want us to be skilled up in and to help guide them with. We're also ISO accredited, and we are experts around some of the technologies we talked about, such as cloud document framework, well-architected framework, Agile landing zones, and how we work with organizations. Okay, so hopefully that's given you some confidence about how it looks in terms of transforming into the cloud and how you could work with a partner such as Cloud Direct with that, and some of the expertise we have when it comes to specific applications that you have, such as Clio and others, in migrating into the cloud, which are always a little bit challenging. But I'm just going to stop talking there for a little bit, where that I've talked for just over 35 minutes now. So just to open it up to any Q&A that Kim's seen within the chat.
Hi, Rich. Yes, we have one question, and it says, will my team need to be upskilled to match the cloud operating model?
And the answer to that is, I would expect there to be a level of upskilling and certainly awareness in terms of how some of the cloud functionality works. How much you want them to do is really up for conversation. So we see some organizations who have very large and strong IT functions, and they've known they need to modernize themselves for a period of time. They want to adopt the cloud, but they want to have those people still maintain a level of control and be directly assisting the business with that. So as well as what they do with the software and how they manage that themselves, they want to stay very close to the management of the systems. So what we do for them is any of the pieces that they don't want to do and they want to out-task to us, they do that. So that's part of that conversation around where that split responsibility is for the different tasks. Other organizations really don't see any value in keeping that in-house, and effectively they want to treat us either as their IT infrastructure team or wider capabilities on top of that, or they want to have a very loose top over in terms of how they manage their IT infrastructure, but effectively have a vast amount of the out-tasking for some of the more specialized cloud expertise with us. So again, how that looks for you as an organization is part of that conversation around how that strategy looks and what your specific target cloud operating model. This is not a one-size-fits-all. So I think going through that conversation and working out where you want to be with your workloads, where you want to be the portfolio, how does it look for you in the next 3-5 years, is part of that, and how do you see us helping you to achieve that? And that's both as part of that transition itself as you transform, and also what it looks like from that steady state once you start adopting it and you're going through that iteration that we talked about earlier. So hopefully that explains that.
And we have another one. How do I identify which workloads are best to migrate first?
We can help you assess the different workloads. But as I said earlier, some of them just kind of lend themselves to being in the cloud first. So certainly anything which your customers are accessing, there's a web interface. If there's any interface points with the customers, then putting those into public cloud just makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of integration, not just with Azure AD, with Enter ID in terms of your identities, but can also integrate really nicely with things like Microsoft Live IDs or Google or Twitter and others when you're doing that business to consumer type approach. So again, making use of cloud portals, making use of cloud authentication if you don't want to store user information yourself, and obviously PII is a big conversation point in itself, is part of that. So helping to have good systems which are highly available and making use of that fantastic cloud infrastructure is a sensible starting point for a large number of organizations. Or it might just be some of the simpler virtual machines that you want to move over and test how those run within the cloud. And we see other organizations want to move everything whole scale because they've got reasons to do that, or they might want to take a more tentative, iterative approach to what they move instead. But we can help you establish what some of those simpler workloads would look like if that's the approach you want to take.
That's all the questions that we have so far.
Okay, well, just wanted to thank you for taking time out your days to spend this with us. Hopefully that's been useful to you. Just going to give you a couple of contacts. If you do want to have a follow-on conversation with this, then we'd love to hear from you. Put up the name for one of our cloud sales executives who works purely in the legal space. So Dan Robbins can help you there. Contact details are there, and we'll share that with you in the chat as well, if you don't mind posting that in that chat as well, Kim. Likewise, if you want to just take your phones and scan the QR code, and this is a safe one to use, then you can scan that and that will give you the details as well, so you can get straight to it as well. So I'll leave that up on screen as we finish off, just in case you want to take some of those details down, screenshot it, take a photo, scan it in, whichever way you want to do it. Okay, but thank you again for your time. Thank you.